In this video, we're going to show you a complete walkthrough of how to use the Trakr GitHub app. So I'm here started by logging into my Trakr account. And if you navigate to my account under integrations, make sure you have installed the app here. So you should see the button to uninstall the integration, as well as having your desired repositories authorized under this integration app. So make sure you have that taken care of, and you can refer to the documentations before we get started. Here I also have a website, example website or web app. So this is going to be the one that we're going to use to demonstrate how the GitHub app works for us. So finally, on my third tab, this is the corresponding code base for this website web app that I just shown. So for this repository, I actually only have 2 branches, as you can see. So our base branch, or the branch that we're going to deploy the code, is the master branch. Then I have 1 branch here, which is what I'm going to use to demonstrate the testing, is a feature branch where we're going to apply some updates to the code base and to the web app. So let's get started. So I'm going back to my Trakr account. You see this home screen and the onboarding. So I'm going to create the project. Once you have connected the GitHub app, now you have some options when you're creating a new project. So now you can actually create a project from a GitHub repository that you have authorized. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to select that repository I'm going to work with. And only the repositories that you have authorized will show up in the selection. So next. So I'm going to give some name. I'll use default. The base URL here, I'm going to copy and paste in this base URL. The branch, this is very important. I'm going to select the master branch as my base branch, which is the branch that we're actually deploys things to. This is my base branch. This is kind of the branch where live website web app lives. Continuous integration setup, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but in this case I'm going to select, I have a build. Device breakpoints, I'm going to select a couple of them just to illustrate, and then save. Great, so now I've finished. If I go to my project, as you can see, I now have a project set up and created onto my homepage. Now I don't really have to do anything with this project at this point. Now I can just fully work with GitHub and everything should be fine. You don't have to come back and reconfigure things unless you change something in GitHub. So now let's go to GitHub. So as I mentioned earlier, I have a feature branch which I'm going to use for a pull request. The Trakr GitHub app works by pull requests. So if I create a pull request that uses my base branch as my as the branch to merge into, and then compare with my feature branch, let's create a pull request. So once I create a pull request, as you can see, some additional things happen versus just a regular pull request. There's some checks that appears under the screen. There's a couple of things. One is a base screenshot, as we can see, has been created. So what that means is that if I go back to my projects, we can see that it actually has started to create a screenshot collection against that base environment, and this is going to be used for our visual comparison tests. There's another item here, the actual test, and it says it's in progress, input required. And the reason for this is because what we need is something to compare the base screenshot collections with, and what we need is actually something called a build environment. So a lot of continuous integration systems will generate a what they call a build environment when you create a pull request. In this case, we can say let's provide a build environment for this pull request. So you're taking back to Trakr. So for me, for us, in this particular case, we actually just generated a build environment at this particular URL. Looks very similar. So I'm going to use that as my build environment. And we just need to make sure that the build environment is publicly accessible. So you could use something like a base authentication, HT password to lock it, but Trakr needs to be able to access that. So right now it cannot be contained in a private network or within the virtual box. So I'm going to save this. Great. So this takes me back to the pull request, and then now I can see that in this pull request, all the checks have passed. So that's great. What does it mean? So what Trakr does when we run this visual comparison test right now is that we don't actually automatically mark your test as pass or fail. It's a neutral status. What it means is that we generated that test, but what we want you to do is still go and view that test, which you can see on the link below, and then you can review it. So I go to this this report, and I see that there's no change on any of the items, which which is great news for us, which means that it looks like this test is passing. There's no any change. So in that case, what we can do is just we can mark this as pass, and what that does is just marking this actual test, this check run within this pull request as passed. So now we can see that all the checks have passed in this pull request. Therefore, Trakr has automatically ran the test in this pull request. Now, if you have any additional commits in this pull request, this process repeats itself, and it will generate new visual tests for for the new build if you have new builds. So it just does this for you, and you don't have to worry about it. So that concludes this very quick walkthrough testing with the Trakr GitHub app.